What would it mean to let go of your ego completely and empathize 100% with another person without thinking about yourself at all? On today's episode of Dreamers Like Joseph, we sit down with Rabbi Moshe Chaim Eade, a master of Jewish mysticism and the Hasidic tradition, to discuss a story from Hasidic folklore that tackles this concept. It's not a story about miracles, but it's a story about a person who displayed an almost miraculous ability to transcend his own human nature, to put aside his own feelings of pain and instead focus on somebody else. It's a fascinating story. And Rav Moshe Chaim Eade is an amazing friend and colleague and a spiritual mentor who's reached and influenced so many people. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And if you have any feedback, email us at dreamerslikejoseph@gmail.com or reach out to us on any of our channels. Today's episode is sponsored by, as always, Marlowe Plastics, My Glasses Guy, and Studio Rosetta. So if you need anything made out of plastic, glasses, or graphic design, you know exactly where to go. Rabbi Eid.
Shalom Aleichem.
Thank you so much for joining us on Dreamers Like Joseph. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be here, my friend.
Okay, phenomenal. So when I first introduced the show, I was very clear with the audience that starting a new podcast in 2026, it's really a radical thing to do. It's groundbreaking. No one else is really in the space. And that's the kind of brand that we want to have. We want to always make sure that we're on the cutting edge. I mean, we've created a lot of buzz in the industry. People are pretty excited about this. And I want to keep that going. That's our brand. So if you don't mind, I used this new technology. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called ChatGPT. And I used it
Once or twice, I think I heard of it.
You've heard of it. So it's fascinating. You can do so many things with it. I actually got it to write an intro about you. If you could even imagine a computer doing something like that.
We must be living in futuristic times.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read it. I'm pretty sure it's 100% accurate, but I'm going to use that as our intro for you, and then you can fill in anything else to the audience that you think they need to know. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Eade is a world-renowned rabbi whose teachings have reached hundreds of thousands of people around the world. He was born and raised in Toronto, Canada, where he quickly became... Toronto. See, I knew.
Six. They didn't quite get it. The trying.
Where he quickly became a local legend. He was a basketball prodigy, and by the age of 12, he was already the starting center for the Toronto Raptors. In 1993, they swept Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the NBA Finals, something that many experts say prompted Jordan to retire and pursue baseball. Despite achieving legendary status in Canada, Rabbi Eid sought something deeper and embarked on a spiritual journey. That path led him to Jerusalem, where he eventually joined the yeshiva Eish Torah, where he currently teaches today. He has become a master of Jewish wisdom, a teacher at the yeshiva, and his wisdom and his teachings reach thousands of people worldwide through his videos. He's, with his classes and his lectures, inspiring them to connect with their heritage and faith and to live healthier, more meaningful, and more fulfilling lives. If you want, I can write you another version with more detail. Do you want me to do that? Welcome to the show, Rabbi Eid.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. So things are pretty good until we got to the Raptors. And the protege thing was, a little bit much.
I hear. Okay. Listen, I'm sure they're still working out the kinks in the technology.
Bizlat Hashem.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll use it to good.
Mirz Hashem. Yeah, God willing.
Okay, so let's make some moves. How can we share the light? How can we connect to Joseph?
Dreaming like Joseph. So it's really a show about stories and, really getting into how stories affect us, how we see ourselves through stories. So I just want to start with one connection, building off the intro. I'm American. I'm from New York, and we have a lot of people here in the yeshiva where we work. This institution. We have a big mix of people: Americans, Canadians, British, and it's always interesting to think about the stories in each culture. So in America, the character in the American story tends to be, the rugged individual making it alone. The cowboy who rides into town by himself and with his guns and his wits, he just saves the day. So when you were growing up, in the culture that you grew up in, what would you say was the kind of story, the paradigm, archetype story that you grew up with that made an impression on you at the beginning?
So it's interesting. Thank you. I think I grew up generally different than most people. Generally not the regular Toronto Canadian kid, even though the basketball and the Raptors would seem to be something more of the regular dream. I grew up more in a way of understanding stories that my father had told me, stories of things that we heard from someone named Joseph Campbell, which was somebody that taught stories of what he called the story of the hero.
The hero's journey.
The hero's journey, this archetypical vision of somebody going on this journey to find something that was greater than the mundane that he saw and the challenges that the hero faces. And I don't think I had any hero's complex, but I had this feeling like the regular rat race of growing up in a Western world. And like Rabbi Eid likes to say, even if you win the rat race, you're still a rat. So I resonated with that at a young age. What are we here for? Where are we going? What is this all about? And I connected to that idea of the healer, of the hero, helping people, being on a mission to help people. And that ultimately led me here to meet the great rabbis here in Jerusalem. So that was the original story archetype for me, was the hero, somebody that wanted to help and make a difference.
And were you drawn to stories in general? Did you read a lot? Were you a very imaginative type of person?
I was more imaginative than reading. I think the first stories that really drew me and probably countless millions of other people were Harry Potter. Harry Potter was, my mother said to me, it's the first time I saw you sit down and read a book for more than 5 or 6 seconds. And I had this feeling like it pulled me into a world that was bigger. I mostly spent time in the stories that I was imagining in my head. I did a lot of running as a kid, cross-country running. I love running, going out. I always like the idea of running, is that you're not competing against anybody. You just go and run. You go into a place, cross-country running, going into the forest. And I like the idea that my mind could go to places, could think, I could clear my mind. And I thought about destiny. I thought about what this world is all about. And when you run for a while, so you spend time by yourself, you feel a connection to the more subtle, sublime elements of creation. So those were the things that were running in my mind as a kid. Not so much reading, some reading. Harry Potter started something, and come to yeshiva, a lot of reading.
I'm kind of the opposite. I barely ever did anything physically exerting at all as a kid, but I would read constantly. Just reading. Oh, I definitely read Harry Potter. Read a lot of other things also. I have run once or twice in life, meaning not
to
like
a
running.
Bus or something?
Yeah, to a bus. No, but I mean like just scheduled running just to run. And I can relate to that. It does unlock something when you're running. It's almost like your body being occupied with this activity of, okay, I just got to keep running. That occupies one part of your brain. That seems to unlock something else in your mind where we start thinking about things and making connections. I don't know how that works, but I've definitely experienced that.
It's like a flow state that the body goes into, and it gets into a place where it just moves. It just goes, and the body gets on this automatic, so it starts to just stop bothering you because the body's just moving, and now the mind opens up. It becomes a meditation.
Wow. It's interesting that you mentioned Harry Potter. I think, I guess for our generation, that was an extremely popular book, and it really did get a lot of kids to read who never read. And I think part of what was so popular about those books is that it was very easy, especially for the young people who read the books, to see yourself in the story. To imagine yourself with that group of friends or having those type of adventures. It was something that very drew you in and created a world that you could see yourself in.
There were archetypes that you felt, I see that there's a bad guy, there's forces of bad, but you don't know, is he really bad, is he good? There's this play of darkness and light. There's something more magical about things that open you up, that maybe the world is not exactly as cut and dry as I thought that it was. Maybe there's something more about this world. Now, I think there are some issues of avodah zara elements.
Sure, and we'll put that in subtitles for anyone who doesn't know what that is.
That crept in, but it opened up, I think, in many young minds, something of a beyondness of the regular 9 to 5.
Right, and I think, I remember at the time when the books were coming out, there was a lot of articles in in Jewish publications about, is there like a Jewish connection to Harry Potter? Or, then we had some articles criticizing Harry Potter, like you referenced. But I think, for me, the takeaway is more the idea that, taking it to Jewish stories and much more ancient and much more powerful stories, the stories of the Torah, the stories that every Jew learns and grows with over the years, is the idea of like seeing ourselves in a story. And that's really the theme of this podcast, Dreamers Like Joseph, is the idea of when we study a Jewish story, a Torah story, one of those traditional ancient stories. I don't mean ancient in a negative sense. I mean ancient in the sense that it has that power of being
People
old,
are drawn to the ancient
having,
nowadays.
and having
People
accompanied
know
us,
that
right?
what's new and plastic is not the future. They
Right.
know that the ancient is where it's at, and that
Right.
the ancient is so real and vital.
Right, the ancient in the sense of, our source. This is where we come from.
Ah,
So
beautiful.
When we read those stories, as you read a story about King David, you read a story about Jonah trying to dodge his prophecy. Any one of those classic stories, there's an idea of that becomes a blueprint for something for me to see in my life. That's really, again, if there's people who've actually watched more than one episode of this, this might start to feel repetitive, but that's the idea I'm trying to hammer home with this podcast. So. With that being said, let's go into your story. You didn't really tell me much about the story you want to discuss, which is great. Coming in cold, I love it. But I do want to give a little introduction. So we have texts, very important texts in Judaism. Call it with a catch-all term, the Torah. That gets divided up into written Torah and oral Torah, which just refer to different books at this point from different parts of history. And there's stories in those texts. The written Torah, maybe some of our audience knows that by its other name, the Old Testament. You might know it from a bedside table at a hotel, maybe, if you stayed in one.
The Holy Bible, my friends.
The Holy Bible. And then the Talmud is another book where it's a very extremely important and beloved text for us. I wouldn't suggest anybody do any research on that right now. It's probably not that easy to get any positive Google search results on the Talmud anymore.
It's probably a good idea if you want to learn about the Talmud and
talk
the
to
Babylonian
Rabbi Eid.
Talmud. You should speak to people who actually learn it.
Yeah,
that might be a very good idea.
That's a great way to get actual information about it. But those are
You mean more than actually watching a couple of TikTok videos on the subject?
There may be more to it than that.
Becoming an expert on the Talmud?
There may be more to it than that. This 2,711 page text that grown men spend their entire lives dedicated to studying and understanding. There's a little bit more to it.
I thought Candace got it cold after October 7th. She learned the whole thing.
No, she missed one or two things. So anyhow, those are our main texts where our most important stories come from. And then inspired by those stories, in the wake of those stories, there's been Jewish cultural and folk traditions where new stories develop. And one of the most powerful and important genres of folk stories that have developed is what's called the Hasidic tale, the Hasidic story. And what Rabbi Eid is going to discuss with us today is an example of something from that genre. So before you say a story and we talk about it and break it down a little bit, could you just give a little bit of an introduction to somebody who may have never heard of this before? What is the genre of the Hasidic story and why is it so important?
So I would say that Hasidic stories, the idea behind them, is that we're speaking about very righteous people. That's the starting point. We're starting about people who dedicated their entire lives to God, who believe and live in a concrete, firm reality with God as the creator, sustainer of heaven and earth, enlivening them every single second, and they're living with that. Anybody who lives with that reality starts to see God as a very real part of their life. And because God is infinite, God can then move within their life what people would think is the finite rules of reality, which are more negotiable, and the infinite spiritual reality being the non-negotiable part of reality. Somebody who lives with the non-negotiables of life. God is a non-negotiable. God is a firm reality of existence. Because God is the infinite creator, sustainer, he could move physical reality around. So in general, people will see in the Hasidic tales, people that were wondrous, special people, had a connection to the infinite, the divine, where God started to then move physical reality around them because of their amazing connection to God. Another way to say it is that it says, we'll say the words, and I'm sure you'll put in the titles below, is that it says that tzaddik goizer v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu makayim. That when a tzaddik says something, Hashem says, well, the righteous person said, let me now listen and do the will of that tzaddik. And one of the ways to understand that is very straightforward, is that this righteous person listens to everything that God says. He has a clear directive in his heart that God, you have told me to keep the 613 mitzvahs. I am committed and I live my life by that. So measure for measure, God says, you listen to everything that I say, I'll listen to that which you say. And therefore many Hasidic tales of miraculous events happening because these were people that were so connected to the will of God, and God says, you're connected to my will, I'll do your will. So that's the general introduction to these stories. We seem to see them at the beginning of the time of the Baal Shem Tov, and then until this very day, those that are, they call them the Wunder Rabbinas, the wonder rabbis, and it's really as simple as that. They being connected to God and the will of God, God said, you made your will my will, I'll make my will your will. And I'll do that which you want and are asking to do. And those that are righteous are careful with this. They don't just pull rabbits out of hats to something fun at a party. Yeah. We're talking about that there was a need that they felt to do a certain thing, either to bring more emunah, more belief to the generation, to help a certain person going through something. But these are specific tales. Now the tale that I want to tell is actually nothing miraculous. Nothing miraculous, but I feel it really touches to the core of really what the Hasidic movement is all about.
Okay, and just to give a little background to that movement, it was started by, you mentioned the Baal Shem Tov, and it was a movement within Judaism that created a lot of passion and a lot of rejuvenation in Judaism. I guess just to summarize something very, very big into just a sentence or two. And the stories, from what I understand, it started with the Baal Shem Tov, saying stories to his followers. And sometimes those are stories with very simple motifs, wagon drivers, horses getting stuck in the mud, simple things. And then as the stories, those stories that the Baal Shem Tov said were actually, extremely mystical and profound lessons couched in, those simple terms. And it seems like from there, if I understand it correctly, as the movement grew, the stories began to include the people themselves, the rabbis themselves, right? So there's the stories, that they would tell, and then there's the stories that would be told about them, and that's all included in the genre of the Hasidic story. Is that accurate?
I think that's very accurate.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. And we're going to put links in the show description to all different types of sources. You can explore any of the things that are mentioned here by Rabbi Eid. Okay, so Rabbi Eid, without further ado, we'd love to hear your story.
So there was one story that I was thinking about with a great, great rabbi named the Satmar Rebbe. The Satmar Rebbe of Yoel Teitelbaum, who was considered by many one of the greatest of his generation and lived in the 20th century. And just to give a little bit of a background of the Satmar Rebbe, so we're going to include another story as an introduction to the story.
That's how it works, exactly. There always has to be a story within the story.
In the times, in the mid-1900s, there was a very special also miracle worker that started to have his name spread throughout the world, and his name was the Baba Sali. So the Baba Sali of the great Abu Hatzera dynasty was already being known as somebody that was performing different wondrous things. People probably know him from the bottle of arak in a paper bag that seemed to never finish, but many, many other wondrous miracles. And now the Jewish people have been very cautious over the generations of very wondrous, charismatic people that are into mystical things, that are performing miracles. So they had a delegation in Europe that wanted to go and see the Baba Sali, and he was at that time living in France. So they sent a delegation to France of Chassidim, of the Hasidic leaders, to go. And there was 3 things they had to ascertain. So somebody once asked me, how do you know somebody's a real tzaddik? So it seems that this would be a good way to ascertain these 3 things. So what were the 3 things? Number 1, is the Baba Sali careful with netilos yadayim?
That's ritual washing your hands.
Ritual washing of the hands, which really on a deeper level means, is this person sensitive to spiritual reality? Is he sensitive to spiritual reality? And that's very much found in all of the ritual hand washing that we do. Number 2, is the wife of the Baba Sali tsanua? Is she a modest person? Because Eishes Chaver Kechaver, the wife of a great person will themselves be a great person. And number 3, I want you to go find his opinion on the Satmar Rebbe. So the delegation went to France, and they came to the house and they saw that the Baba Sali was absolutely to the highest level of perfection, careful with the washing of his hands. They realized the Rebbetzin, either they didn't see her, or they saw that she was someone of very modest stature and greatness. And then they said, what are your thoughts on the Satmar Rebbe? And he put his arms up in the air and he said, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, holy, holy.
By the way, you can take it. We're very chilled here. There we go.
This is a very smart phone, this one.
Yeah, I see that.
So
I wonder if it has ChatGPT on it.
I don't know. That's the old version. It got smarter since then. So Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. So they understood that
which means it's the highest expression of holiness that we have.
That's
three
right.
times holy.
That's right. So they understood that Baba Sali is very, very unique and special, and we are still blessed to have the light of the Baba Sali in his students and his teachings until this very day. So that's just an introduction to the Satmar Rebbe. So once upon a time, there was somebody who came to the Satmar Rebbe. Now the Satmar Rebbe was famous as being somebody who gave out tremendous amounts of tzedakah. He was like a headquarters that people would give him money to distribute to all those in need. And the Satmar Rebbe, people seem to identify him as somebody who had certain opinions on the state.
The state of Israel.
The state of Israel. However, what people don't seem to mention is that whenever there was a soldier that passed away, a Yiddish neshama, the Satmar Rebbe cried more tears than everyone put together. He would cry, and he loved Klal Yisrael and felt Klal Yisrael tremendously. So the Satmar Rebbe met with so many Yidden, so many Jews around the world, and he would give them money, he would give them time, he would give them his heart, he would, whatever he could do. So one time somebody came to the Satmar Rebbe and he was on crutches, and he was very much crippled, it looked like, and limping badly, and he said to the Rebbe, I have to tell you, I just had this horrible injury, and my wife just died. And I have children at home that I have to feed, and I'm going through so much challenge, and just, Rebbe, please, help me. I could really use a son. And the Satmar Rebbe sat with him and felt what he was going through. And he said, please, and he gave him a large sum of money. And this Jew left on his crutches and hobbled away. And the Chassidim, for whatever reason, decided they wanted to follow this person out. And when they saw that he was getting past the street where this meeting was, they saw that this person put his crutches under his arms and started walking at a normal gait and went over to his wife to tell her that we got the money. The scam worked. So the Chassidim ran back to the Satmar Rebbe and they said, Rebbe, this guy's a con artist. He's scammed you out of the money. He's not crippled. And his wife, he went to go see us. The Satmar Rebbe said, oh, thank God. Thank God. I was so worried that his wife died. I'm so happy she's alive. Oh, I'm so happy he's not crippled. I'm so happy that he's healthy. Oh, I wasn't going to sleep tonight so well, knowing that all the trauma that happened to this person, I'm so happy is okay. Wow. That story has nothing wondrous in it, but what it shows you is the wondrous heart of a Jewish leader. Because everyone was responding like, he scammed you in this. And all he could care about is that there was one less Jew that had pain in their life.
It's incredible. Kind of foregoing his own pain, his own injured ego, his own sense of, I was taken advantage of. None of that even came up. None of that even registered on the radar. Just, this guy is doing okay. I thought he was in trouble, and now I found out.
I'm happy there's less pain in another Jew's life. That means everything to me.
That's incredible. Now, do you remember when you first heard that story?
I first heard that story from Rabbi Dov Ber many years ago.
Wow.
But for some reason, I just didn't understand it, appreciate it. I heard it, but it didn't register. And then I heard it again from Rav Meir Zilberberg in detail. And then the next day I was reading Rav Zilberstein's book about Vaharevna and all the questions that are asked, interesting questions about Genevas Das, and he quoted the story there, and I felt it was a kiss from Hashem. And since that I saw it again from Rav Meir Zilberberg. And then the next day I opened up Rav Zilberstein's Sefer. I just can't stop thinking about the story. I can't stop. That was probably about 2 months ago. This story is with me about a whole perspective of what really matters.
Right. I'm honestly not surprised at all that this is the story you've chosen to tell, because having worked with you for a few years and having had the opportunity to see how you work with students and to discuss certain issues that come up, I've always been struck by that part of your character, that you have an extraordinary amount of empathy, and that's something that I try, that I wish that I could model myself after, because a lot of times it's just like this some of the issues that guys come up with, and you're just like, I don't have the bandwidth to deal with this right now. That's what I would say, not what you would say.
Yidden is so good, and when they go through difficult things, just to try to give our hearts. People, I think, in this generation, they're so broken. People are so much looking for they're not even so much, I think, looking for Rebbes anymore. They're just looking for a chaverim makshivim, mekablen dain bin dain. Just two people that could listen to each other. A friend that could just hear you out, that could just be there, that could just let you cry and just feel what they're going through. And it seems as soon as somebody does that, the healing is already beginning. They don't feel alone anymore. Somebody is with me on this journey, and it gives them this power, like weiter. We can go forward, we can do great things into the world together. The Jewish people have a mission, and it picks people up, I believe.
What do you think? I mean, you're a master of Jewish wisdom. You teach so many different books.
I'm a schlepper, just trying to say Torah's emes b'siyata d'shmaya.
But let's say somebody is trying to develop that capacity. I once heard somebody use the image of one of those small regional airports versus a big hub where there's hundreds of planes taking off and landing. If you've ever been to a small regional airport, I was once at the airport in Mobile, Alabama. There's just one or two planes, and that's pretty much all they can handle. If more planes come in, it's just they're not. So sometimes that's I've heard someone use that as like the image for our emotional capacity. Like some big tragedy happens, or someone tells you a really sad story, and you just feel like there's no place for this plane to land. Like my airport just doesn't have the capacity. I'm the regional airport. I'm not the big hub. I can't handle all the payloads and the shipments of someone else's pain that's coming in, and that leads to us disconnecting and just kind of alienating ourselves or becoming numb because we don't know how to process it. So
who told us we're a small airport? Who told us that? We've convinced ourselves and society, and we've convinced ourselves that we're small. We have small bandwidth. We're so big. I think when a person spends time with big people, go spend time with a Rosh Yeshiva or a Berkowitz of Eshet Torah. When you see big people, they give you this feeling like you're big. You know a big person, when you walk away, you don't feel that small. You just feel big. Then they're really big. Big people remind you how big you are. Like this story, the Satmar Rebbe reminds me just how big Jews can be. And it makes me bigger. Makes me think about, I could be bigger than my own small Daled Amos, my own little, back to the rat race, my own little thing. I could be big. I could think about people. Who told us we're the small airport? And I think to remind ourselves that we're big, that's number one. There may be things that have to be worked through to get to believe that I'm big again. But being with big people is very helpful. And
is there anything else, again, from your smorgasbord of Jewish wisdom, anything you would share for someone who wants to embody the lesson of this story, the idea of just being able to put your own ego and feelings aside and just to completely empathize with another person? Is there any tips or tricks, skills from that?
We don't have any tricks.
Right,
no everything
tricks.
about
right, that's a wrong word, but
like Osherad, bli tricksim v'li shtikim.
Exactly.
So,
or a method. Let's say a method, a tahalich, a process, an approach to developing this character trait within ourselves. To just to
speak to Hashem about it. Speak to Hashem. Say, Hashem, I want to be bigger. I want to feel the hearts of the Jewish nation. I want to be someone that's able to receive the feeling of Am Yisrael. This is something that is so profound that I heard before. I remember it's so obvious. And I one time heard a head of a seminary say it. He was speaking at a certain event, and he said it, and it just, we know it, but when somebody mentions it and you catch it, it's a game changer. He said, if somebody could say Shmona Esrei.
That's the central core text of Jewish formal prayer. We all know you can pray to God in your own words. In New York, that prayer is, Dear God, please let me find a parking spot. I don't know what the prayer is in Toronto. That's praying in your own words. But also we have the classic text of Jewish prayer that takes those personal feelings and filters it through these very powerful words composed by our sages, and that creates the ultimate mega prayer.
So when you're in that mega prayer,
Yeah.
as composed by the sages, which opens up all the pathways of blessing, you could never forget that every one of the blessings are in the plural form. Rifa'enu. I'm not just asking that I should be healed. I'm thinking about all of Am Yisrael. Rifa'enu. I'm thinking about millions of human beings. Shema kolenu. Hear all of our prayers. Baruch Aleinu. Hashem, let there be financial abundance for everybody. I'm thinking here, I got this problem here, and this check is bouncing, and this thing, and I want to get a new house. Baruch Aleinu. How many times did I think that every single member of Klal Yisrael should have unbelievable abundance and blessing? So it's a reminder 3 times a day. When I first heard that, I was like, whoa, that's good Musar. Start implementing into the daily diet the awareness that we're supposed to all the time think about Am Yisrael. And Shmona Esrei, the mega formalized prayer from the men of the Great Assembly, are literally handing this to us that we can interface with that consciousness 3 times a day. So that, I think, is a very important takeaway. Is during the Shmona Esrei to remember we're in this together. We're in this together. I would suggest another thing. Whenever you see a sign up, you might be in a synagogue, you might be outside of a mikveh, and you see a sign that says, please pray for this person. You might be by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's kever, and it says, please pray for the healing of so-and-so, the daughter of so-and-so. So sometimes we see these signs and you just walk by it. When Rav Meltzer of the Mir told me this, he said, whenever you see a sign like that, just daven at that second. Just walk by, think about that sign. You see a chayal that's injured, daven at that second. You see any interface that is calling you to be bigger. So if you think, you know what, I'll remember the name, I'll write it down, daven later, you'll probably lose the piece of paper and it won't happen. Even though maybe it will happen, but likely not, sadly. When you see the name, just try your best at that moment. So I remember walking around Yeshivas Mir, which is one of the great kingdoms of Torah learning here in Jerusalem, and walking with Rabbi Meltzer, of Gershom Meltzer, walking through the halls of the Mir for many years, just walking with him through the halls. And whenever he'd see a sign, just quickly he'd pray for that person. It would take literally a second and pray for that person. So I would suggest that that's a very good takeaway, and I'll provide our dear listeners with one more takeaway, especially those that feel that they are B'nai Torah and they want to grow in their Torah learning, and they're people that spend a lot of time learning Torah. So Berkowitz loves quoting this. The Maharal speaks about this as well as others. In the 48 ways to wisdom, how can we be an Eshet Torah and not mention Reb Noach's 48 ways to wisdom? So the 48 ways to wisdom, which is from the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos, says that one of the 48 ways to wisdom, I understand some of the simple ones. You want to become wise in Torah learning? So learn. Sleep less, so you could learn more. But then one of them is very fascinating. Feel your brother's pain. Feel your brother's pain. If anything, that's maybe stopping me from learning Torah. I have to spend time sitting with this guy in his bed in his dorm room, feeling his pain. I want to get back to Tosfos. So the Shiva likes quoting from the Maharal and from the Shla Kodesh. The Torah was given to the entirety of the Jewish nation. If you want to be somebody that receives the Torah, it's to the degree that you are part of the Jewish nation. And therefore, if you want to be close to Hashem through His Torah, ensure that you are somebody that is learning the Torah and feeling like the Satmar Rebbe felt, the connection to the Jewish nation. May Hashem bless us to have those feelings. It's a tremendous honor to have this time together.
Thank
you, Rabbi Schwartz.
Thank you
pleasure.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this. It's been fantastic. I hope we can do it again soon.
Looking forward. All the best. Call to